The sun greeted me warmly that morning, a rare treat after weeks of dreary weather. My hands, wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee, were still as I stood in the garden, admiring the newly blossomed roses. It was a perfect holiday morning, serene and promising, until the peace was shattered by the sound of a car pulling up in the driveway. Richard, my husband of 10 years, stepped out of the car, followed closely by his sister Anna. They were an odd pair, Richard with his stern, lined face, and Anna, ever the carefree spirit, albeit with a cunning glint in her eyes. They were laden with bags, their arms straining under the weight. I set my cup down, a sense of unease creeping up my spine. "Richard, what's all this?" I asked, my voice steady despite the alarm bells ringing in my head. Richard's response was blunt, like a sledgehammer to my calm morning. "We're moving in with you from today," he declared, as Anna smirked beside him. I felt the ground shift beneath me. "What do you mean moving in, and why?" Anna's smirk widened. "If you don't like it, Helen, you can always divorce him and leave," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Before I could gather my wits to respond, they barged past me, their footsteps heavy against the wooden floor. My once tranquil living room was quickly cluttered with their belongings. I stood frozen, watching the invasion of my personal space, my sanctuary. Just then, Mia, Anna's 14-year-old daughter, entered the room. Her eyes, a mirror image of her mother's, were filled with apology. Unlike Anna, Mia had always been gentle, a flower struggling to bloom in the shadow of her mother's overpowering presence. I found my voice, albeit a whisper. "Is this really okay? I mean, with Mia and all?" Richard, who had been directing Anna on where to place her myriad of bags, stopped dead in his tracks. His face, usually an unreadable mask, turned pale. Without a word, he dashed out, his phone pressed against his ear. Anna, now left alone to face me, looked as if she might faint. The arrogance had vanished from her face, replaced by a dawning realization of something gone awry. "I can't wait for Richard to come back," I said, my voice stronger now. Anna flinched at my words. "Brace yourself, Anna. The real fight starts now." As I stood there, facing the chaos, a part of me wondered how my life had spiraled into this mess. I was Helen Davis, a 50-year-old accountant, living a life that was more a routine than an experience. My marriage to Richard, once a source of comfort, had become a suffocating trap. Richard and I met at a community event. He was a local businessman 10 years my senior, and I was a volunteer. We connected over shared interests, and before I knew it, we were married. It was a simple ceremony, Richard insisting that anything more was frivolous. From the start, Richard was a traditionalist. He believed in clear roles within a marriage, and unfortunately that meant I was relegated to the background, my opinions and desires secondary to his. "I'll handle the finances and decisions, you just make sure the house is in order," he would say, his tone final. I complied initially. I thought his dominance was a sign of his commitment and care. But as the years rolled by, the charming businessman I married revealed himself to be controlling and dismissive. Our home, once a haven of shared dreams and laughter, had turned into a silent battlefield. I would tiptoe around his moods and his commands, trying to keep the peace, but inside I was screaming for an escape, for a breath of fresh air. That morning, as I watched Anna spread her belongings across my living room, I felt a surge of anger. This was not just an invasion of space. It was a blatant disregard for my existence, my choices. And Richard, the man who had vowed to cherish and respect me, stood silently by, a spectator to his sister's audacity. Anna's eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw a flicker of fear. She knew she had crossed a line, but her arrogance was too ingrained to step back. She was like a parasite, feeding off Richard's affection and my tolerance. "I hope you're ready for the consequences, Anna," I said, my voice calm but firm. Her response was a scoff, but her eyes betrayed her. She knew she had awakened a dormant adversary, and as I stood there, amidst the chaos they had brought into my home, I realized that this was not just an invasion. It was a declaration of war. The sound of Richard's car pulling up again snapped me out of my thoughts. I braced myself for the confrontation, for the battle that was about to begin. The doors opened, and Richard stormed in, his face a mask of confusion and anger. "What's going on, Helen?" "Why is Anna panicking?" he demanded, his eyes darting between me and his sister. "This," I gestured to the mess around us, "is what your decision has led to. your sister, your house, your rules. But not anymore, Richard. Not anymore. The room was thick with tension, the air heavy with unspoken words and suppressed emotions. Richard looked at me, then at Anna, and a realization dawned on him. He had underestimated me, taken my silence for submission. But as the sun streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow on the chaos, I knew this was just the beginning of my fight for freedom, for my voice. The shadows of retribution were finally lifting, and I was ready to step into the light. Richard's confusion melted into a frown, his eyes narrowing as he absorbed the scene before him. "Helen, this is temporary. Anna needs us," he said, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. I scoffed. "Temporary? Richard, your sister has brought half her house here. And you," I turned to Anna, "you waltz in here as if you own the place." Anna rolled her eyes, a smirk playing on her lips. "Oh, come on, Helen. It's not like you use this space for anything important. Besides, Richard agrees with me, don't you, brother?" Richard nodded, his allegiance clear. "Anna's going through a tough time. We need to be there for her." I felt a surge of anger. "And what about me, Richard? When have you ever considered what I need?" Richard's expression hardened. "You have everything you need, Helen. A roof over your head, food on the table. What more do you want?" His words stung, and I felt a bitter laugh escape my lips. "I want a husband who sees me as an equal, not just a caretaker for his home and his burdensome sister." Anna snorted. "Equal? Please. You should be grateful Richard even married you. At your age, options aren't exactly lining up." Her words were like a slap in the face, but I stood my ground. "Grateful? For a marriage that suffocates me? For a husband who values his sister's whims over his wife's feelings?" Richard's face reddened, his anger boiling over. "Enough, Helen. You're overreacting. Anna is family." "And what am I?" I shot back, my voice trembling with emotion. "Just a convenient accessory to your life?" The room fell silent, the tension thick and suffocating. Richard and Anna exchanged a look, a silent conversation passing between them. I knew then that I was fighting a losing battle. Richard finally spoke, his voice cold. "Pack your things, Helen. If you can't accept my sister, you can't be part of this family." His words were a dagger to my heart, but I refused to let them see me break. "Fine," I said, my voice steady. "I'll leave. But remember this, Richard. I am not your property. I am a person, and I will not be dismissed so easily." I turned on my heel and walked to our bedroom, my mind racing. As I began packing my things, tears blurred my vision. I had given up so much for this marriage, only to be cast aside for Anna's selfishness. But amidst the hurt and betrayal, a fire ignited within me. I would not let them break me. I would fight back, and I would reclaim my life. As I zipped up my suitcase, I looked around the room that had been my sanctuary. It was time to leave, to start anew. But as I stepped out of the bedroom, suitcase in tow, I knew one thing for certain. This was not the end. It was just the beginning of my journey to retribution. The door slammed behind me as I left the house, my heart pounding with a mix of fear, anger, and a newfound determination. The crisp morning air was a sharp contrast to the stifling atmosphere I'd just escaped. I took a moment to steady my breath, realizing that this was the first step towards reclaiming my life. As I walked, the memories of the last few years played in my mind like a tragic movie. Richard, once my rock, had slowly morphed into an unrecognizable tyrant. His sister Anna always lurking in the shadows, influencing his decisions, undermining me at every turn. I found myself outside Mia's school, the realization hitting me that I hadn't said goodbye. Mia, the one ray of light in the otherwise dark canvas of my marriage. I saw her then, walking out of the school gates, her face a picture of innocence and youth. "Mia," I called out, my voice catching in my throat. She turned, her eyes lighting up when she saw me. "Helen, what are you doing here?" I knelt down to her level, my eyes searching hers. "Mia, I've left your uncle's house. Things have become too difficult." Her face fell, a frown marring her young features. "Is it because of Mom? Did she do something again?" I sighed, hating that she had to be exposed to her mother's toxic behavior. "Yes, Mia. Your mom and your uncle, they've made some decisions that I can't live with." Mia's eyes filled with tears, her voice barely a whisper. "I wish you could stay. You're the only one who listens to me, who cares about what I want." I hugged her, my heart breaking. "I care about you so much, Mia, and I promise I'll always be here for you, no matter what." We stood there for a moment, two souls united in our mutual pain. Finally, I pulled away, wiping her tears. You need to be strong, Mia. Don't let them change who you are. You're a wonderful, kind-hearted girl, and I'm so proud of you. Mia nodded, a determined glint in her eyes. I will be, Helen, and I'll come to visit you, wherever you are. As I watched her walk back into the school, a plan began to form in my mind. Richard and Anna had underestimated me, seen me as nothing more than a compliant wife, but I would show them. I would fight back, and I would make them pay for every tear, every moment of pain they had caused me. I walked away from the school, my steps more confident than before. The game had changed, and I was no longer just a pawn. I was a queen, ready to take back my kingdom. I found refuge in a small, unassuming cafe, the kind where strangers become confidants. As I sipped my coffee, the warmth of the mug seeped into my hands, mirroring the growing resolve in my heart. It was there, amidst the quiet hum of the cafe, that I began to piece together my plan. A sudden ring from my phone jolted me. It was Mia. Helen, you need to come to Grandma's house. There's something you should know about Mom. The urgency in her voice was unmistakable. I paid for my coffee and hurried to the address she had given me. Arriving at the quaint house, I was greeted by Mia and her grandparents, Richard and Anna's parents. The air was heavy with tension as they ushered me into the living room. Mia's grandmother, a stern yet kind woman, wasted no time. Helen, we've been blind for too long. Anna is in trouble, and it's far worse than we imagined. I sat, bracing myself for what was to come. Mia's grandfather, a man of few words, spoke up. Anna's addicted to gambling. She's amassed a significant debt, and now she's targeting your home to settle it. The revelation hit me like a tidal wave. Anna's arrogance, her sudden move into our house, it all made sense now. Mia's grandmother continued, her voice laced with regret. We've enabled her for too long, thinking we were helping. But we were wrong. We're cutting her off financially. I nodded, my mind racing with the implications. And Richard? Does he know about this? He knows, Mia's grandfather said, his voice heavy with disappointment. But he's too blinded by his need to protect Anna. He's part of the problem. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, each one fueling my resolve. I stood up, my decision clear. I need to confront them. They need to know I'm aware of their deceit. Mia grabbed my hand, her eyes pleading. Be careful, Helen. Mom can be unpredictable. I squeezed her hand, a smile tinged with determination. Don't worry, Mia. I'm not the same person they think they can push around. It's time they see the real me. Leaving Mia's grandparents' house, I felt a strange cocktail of emotions. Anger, certainly, at the betrayal and deceit. But also empowerment, a sense of clarity and purpose I hadn't felt in years. I drove back to the house, each mile bringing me closer to a confrontation I never imagined I'd have the courage to face. But there I was, ready to stand up to the very people who had made my life a living hell. I entered the house without knocking, finding Richard and Anna in the living room. The sight of them, so complacent in their scheming, ignited a fire within me. Richard, Anna, we need to talk, I announced, my voice steady and commanding. Richard looked up, surprise etched on his face. Helen, what are you doing here? I know about Anna's gambling debts. I know she's planning to use this house to pay them off, I said, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. Anna's face contorted into a sneer. What are you going to do about it, Helen? Cry and run away? I met her gaze, unwavering. No, Anna. I'm going to make sure you both pay for what you've done. To me, to this family. Richard's expression faltered, a hint of guilt flashing across his face. Helen, Save it, Richard. I've heard enough of your excuses. You chose Anna over our marriage. Now, you'll have to live with the consequences. Anna laughed, a harsh, grating sound. You think you can scare us, Helen? You're nothing. You've always been nothing. Her words were meant to wound, but they only strengthened my resolve. I may have been nothing to you, but that ends today. I'm taking back control of my life, and I'll start by making sure everyone knows the kind of people you really are. Richard stood up, a mix of anger and desperation in his eyes. You wouldn't dare. You know how this will look, the scandal, the gossip. I cut him off, my voice cold. I don't care about the gossip, Richard. I care about justice, about righting the wrongs you and your sister have committed. Anna's face turned pale, her bravado faltering. You can't prove anything, Helen. It's your word against ours. I smiled, a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Oh, but I can, Anna. I've been collecting evidence, bank statements, gambling debts, everything. I have more than enough to prove your deceit." Richard's face drained of color. "Helen, please, let's talk about this. We can sort it out." I shook my head. "It's too late for talking, Richard. You made your choice, and now you'll have to face the consequences." As I turned to leave, I left them with one final statement. "I'll be filing for divorce, Richard, and I'll make sure the truth about Anna's debts comes out. You've both played this game for far too long. Now, it's my turn." I walked out of the house, the sound of their panicked voices fading behind me. I had stepped into the battle, fully armed and ready. The game of deceit and betrayal they had been playing was over. It was time for retribution, and I was going to make sure they paid for every tear, every moment of suffering they had caused. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal consultations and covert planning. My lawyer, a sharp-witted woman named Diane, was a beacon of support, guiding me through the labyrinth of divorce proceedings. The day of the confrontation arrived like a storm. I stood outside the courthouse, my heart racing with a mix of dread and determination. Richard and Anna were already there, their faces masks of feigned innocence. As we were called in, I took a deep breath, readying myself for the battle ahead. The courtroom was cold and sterile, a stark contrast to the fiery emotions brewing inside me. Richard's lawyer was the first to speak, painting a picture of a harmonious marriage disrupted by my sudden and unreasonable demands. I listened, my fists clenched, as he spun lies as easily as a spider weaves its web. Then it was Diane's turn. She began methodically, laying out the facts with precision. "Your Honor, the reality is starkly different from what has been presented by the defense. We have evidence of financial misconduct and emotional abuse, all perpetrated by Mr. Richard Davis and his sister, Ms. Anna Davis." Anna's eyes widened, her composure slipping. Richard shifted uncomfortably, his gaze avoiding mine. Diane continued, her voice steady and clear. "We have bank statements showing large sums transferred to Miss Davis's account, coinciding with her gambling debts. We also have testimonies from witnesses who have observed the emotional abuse my client suffered in her marriage." Richard's lawyer tried to interject, but Diane was unyielding. "Furthermore, we have evidence of a plan to sell the marital home without my client's consent to cover Miss Davis's debts." The judge looked over the documents Diane presented, his expression growing increasingly stern. Anna squirmed in her seat, her earlier arrogance replaced by a growing sense of panic. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. I was called to the stand, my heart pounding in my chest. I recounted the years of neglect, the emotional turmoil, and the final straw that broke the camel's back. Their plan to usurp my home. As I spoke, I kept my eyes on Richard and Anna. Richard's face was a picture of defeat, his eyes hollow and resigned. Anna, on the other hand, was seething, her hands clenched into tight fists. The judge finally spoke, his voice echoing in the silent courtroom. "Based on the evidence presented, it's clear that there has been significant wrongdoing on the part of Mr. Davis and Ms. Davis. I am inclined to grant the divorce and rule in favor of the plaintiff, Miss Helen Davis." Anna erupted, her voice shrill with anger. "This is nonsense. She's lying, all of it. Helen's just a bitter old woman who can't stand to see anyone else happy." Her outburst only served to cement the judge's decision. "Order in the court, Miss Davis. Your behavior is only proving the plaintiff's point. I will not tolerate any more outbursts." The gavel came down, and with it, the final blow to Richard and Anna's facade. As we left the courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The truth had prevailed, and karma had served its course. The fallout from the courtroom was swift and unforgiving. News of Richard and Anna's deceit and the divorce spread through our social circles like wildfire. I watched, with a sense of detached vindication, as their reputations crumbled under the weight of their actions. Richard, once a respected businessman, found his clients and associates distancing themselves. Anna, too, faced her own downfall. The gambling dens she frequented now turned her away, her debts too high and her backers too few. But the true retribution came in the form of their parents' intervention. Mia's grandparents, having witnessed the extent of their children's misdeeds, took decisive action. They cut Anna off financially, a move that left her reeling and desperate. I met with Mia's grandparents a few days after the trial. They welcomed me with a warmth that was tinged with sadness. "We should have seen it, Helen," Mia's grandmother lamented. "We turned a blind eye for too long." Mia's grandfather nodded in agreement. "We're taking responsibility now. Anna will have to learn to fend for herself, and as for Richard, he needs to understand the consequences of his choices." Their resolve was a balm to my wounded heart. They, too, had been victims of Richard and Anna's manipulation, and now they stood with me in seeking justice. The next chapter of retribution unfolded at the final divorce settlement meeting. Richard sat across from me, a shadow of the man he once was. His eyes were hollow, his defiance replaced by a quiet resignation. As the terms were laid out, I could see the realization dawn on him. He was losing everything: his home, a significant portion of his assets, and any semblance of dignity he had clung to. Anna, not present at the meeting, was dealt her blow through legal channels. She was required to undertake a debt repayment plan, a far cry from the lavish lifestyle she was accustomed to. As I signed the final papers, a sense of closure washed over me. I had come out of this battle scarred but victorious. Richard and Anna had been brought to justice, not just by the law, but by the karma of their own making. Leaving the meeting, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. I was free from the chains of a loveless marriage, free from the suffocating grip of Richard and Anna's deceit. I had lost much in this fight, but I had gained something far more valuable: my freedom and a chance to rebuild my life on my own terms. As I walked out into the sunlight, I felt a smile spread across my face. It was the smile of a woman who had faced her demons and emerged stronger. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to walking it. The days following the divorce were a mix of relief and rediscovery. I had stepped out of the shadow of my marriage, and now the world seemed different, more vibrant, and filled with possibilities. One afternoon, I found myself in a quaint bookstore, a place I had often passed but never entered during my marriage. As I browsed through the shelves, I felt a sense of peace. It was in these small moments I realized that life began to regain its color. The bell above the door chimed, and in walked Mia, her face brightening as she saw me. "Helen!" she exclaimed, rushing over. "I heard about the divorce being finalized. Are you okay?" I smiled, embracing her warmly. "I'm more than okay, Mia. I feel like I've been given a new lease on life." Her eyes sparkled with unshed tears. "I'm so happy for you, and I'm sorry for everything my mom and uncle put you through." "It's not your fault, Mia. You've been one of the few lights in my life these past few years," I reassured her. We sat down in a cozy corner of the bookstore, sipping tea from the little cafe inside. Mia shared her plans for college, her eyes alight with dreams and ambitions. I listened, my heart swelling with pride for the remarkable young woman she had become. Then Mia hesitated, her expression turning serious. "Helen, there's something else. My grandparents, they want to help you. They feel guilty about everything." I shook my head gently. "Mia, they've done enough. Just having their support during the trial meant the world to me." "But they insist. They want to give you a part of the money from the sale of the house. It's only fair," they said. The offer took me aback. Richard and Anna had been forced to sell the house to settle their debts, and now Mia's grandparents wanted to ensure I received my rightful share. After some thought, I accepted. Not for the money, but to honor the gesture of goodwill and closure from two people who had become like family to me. With this unexpected financial security, I began to rebuild my life. I found a small but charming apartment, decorated it to my taste, and for the first time, made a space that was truly mine. I also rekindled old friendships, ones that had dwindled under the weight of my unhappy marriage. My friends welcomed me back with open arms, their support a testament to the enduring nature of true friendship. As for Richard and Anna, they faded into the background of my life. Richard had moved to a different city, a shadow of his former self, and Anna, burdened by her debts and the loss of her family's support, had become a mere footnote in my story. One sunny afternoon, as I walked through the park, I realized something profound. In seeking revenge and justice, I had found something far more important: my own strength and resilience. The journey had been tumultuous, filled with pain and confrontation, but it had led me to a place of self-discovery and empowerment. I saw couples walking hand in hand, children laughing as they played, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel a pang of sadness or loss. I was content, at peace with my past and optimistic about my future. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park, I reflected on the journey I had undertaken. The road to retribution had been paved with challenges, but it had also brought unexpected blessings. Friendships rekindled, a new sense of purpose, and a deeper understanding of my own resilience. I left the park with a light heart, ready to embrace whatever adventures lay ahead. The chapter of Richard and Anna was closed, but my story was far from over. It was a new beginning, a new chapter filled with hope, possibilities, and a newfound appreciation for the simple joys of life. You really think wearing that will make a good impression? Ethan's words echoed in my mind as I stared at my reflection. I smoothed my hands over the simple black dress I had chosen for dinner with his parents tonight. It wasn't flashy or expensive, but it was me. Or at least, I thought it was until now. Doubts swirled as I recalled Ethan's tone when he saw my outfit earlier. Was he right? Maybe I should have worn something more formal and elegant. But as an emerging artist barely scraping by, my wardrobe was limited. I sighed, pushing the negative thoughts away. I had to stop second-guessing myself. The doorbell rang and I took a deep breath. It was now or never. Ethan greeted me with a weak smile and a peck on the cheek. We drove in tense silence to his parents' lavish downtown apartment. I gazed up at the sleek high-rise apprehensively. "Don't worry, you look great," Ethan finally said, though his voice lacked conviction. My doubts returned, but before I could respond, we were stepping into the cold marble foyer. The sound of my modest heels echoed loudly. "Ethan, so good of you to come," a tall, imposing man greeted us, Ethan's father, Harold. His eyes moved to me, looking me up and down critically. "And you must be. Marina, is it?" I nodded, extending my hand. He shook it limply before turning away. Come in. Dinner's just being served." The expansive apartment was impeccably decorated, with artwork adorning the walls and luxurious furnishings throughout. I sat awkwardly at the large dining table across from Ethan and his parents. An ornate chandelier hung above us. "So, Marina, Ethan tells me you're an artist?" Harold asked after the salad course was served. "Yes, I'm focused on mixed media collage," I replied. Harold raised his eyebrows. "Mixed media collage? Can't say I'm familiar with that particular medium." "Oh, it involves incorporating various materials like papers, fabrics, natural objects." My voice trailed off under his skeptical gaze. An uncomfortable silence descended on the table. "Well, I'm sure it's very avant-garde," Harold finally said dismissively. "But you must realize very few artists actually make a living from such endeavors, right?" I stared down at my plate, my cheeks burning. Where was Ethan in all this? Why wasn't he defending me? I snuck a glance at him, but he seemed completely oblivious, consumed with his food. "Of course," Harold continued, "art is a wonderful hobby for a young woman like yourself, but you need a practical career as well, like finance or law. Don't you agree, Ethan?" Ethan looked up, nodding meekly. "You make a fair point, Dad." I gritted my teeth, humiliation washing over me. The rest of the dinner passed painfully until finally it was over. Ethan and I rode the elevator down to the car in silence. It wasn't until we were driving away that he finally spoke. "I'm really sorry about my dad," he said half-heartedly. "You know how traditional and superficial he can be." I just stared out the window, holding back angry tears. Maybe this relationship was a mistake after all. The weekend after the disastrous dinner, I found myself reluctantly agreeing to a second meeting with Ethan's family. Part of me wanted to end things then and there, but another part still clung to the hope that maybe it was just first impressions. Maybe if I tried again, they would see me for who I really am. Ethan seemed genuinely apologetic about his dad's behavior. "Just give him another chance," he pleaded. "He's old-fashioned, but I know if he gets to know you better, he'll come around." I finally acquiesced, though I knew deep down it was a long shot. Harold and the rest of Ethan's family cared about one thing only: status. Still, I had to try for Ethan's sake. I decided to meet with my mentor Louise beforehand, hoping she could provide some encouragement. She was the one who had first encouraged me to pursue art, even when others said it was impractical. "This boy should be standing up for you," Louise said as we sipped tea in her cozy kitchen. "If he doesn't appreciate who you are, then he's not worth it." Her words resonated with me. I had compromised myself too much for Ethan, dimming my light to avoid outshining his inferiority complex. His weakness revealed the hollowness at the core of his ostentatious family. Their lives were dictated by petty hierarchies and prejudices. I left Louise's house with newfound clarity and a bold idea. I decided I would wear one of her pieces, an exquisite jacket made of paper, cardboard, and fabric scraps, to the family dinner. I knew Harold would scoff at it for looking like arts and crafts, but its beauty stemmed from Louise's brilliant technique of transforming discarded materials into art. The night of the dinner came. My hands trembled slightly as I fastened the final button on the jacket. This was my line in the sand. Ethan clearly felt some trepidation when he arrived to pick me up. "That jacket's different," he noted delicately. I lifted my chin, steadying my resolve. "Yes, it's one of a kind, like me." He nodded, looking away awkwardly. My courage grew. At Harold's apartment, I immediately felt his scornful glare on my outfit. But before he could deride it, I spoke up proudly. "My jacket was handmade by Louise Sanders. I'm sure you've heard of her brilliant found object creations." Harold paused, seeming temporarily impressed. "Louise Sanders? Isn't she that new avant-garde designer featured in Vogue last month?" "The one and the same," I confirmed. "Oh yes, of course," Harold exclaimed with forced enthusiasm. "Her work with recycled materials is so innovative." I smiled victoriously as we sat down to dinner. For once, the power dynamic felt shifted in my favor. Ethan kept grinning at me appreciatively throughout the meal, but Harold's superficiality shone through once again as he remarked, "You know, Marina, with Louise Sanders' pieces skyrocketing in value, you really should consider auctioning off that jacket. I'm sure you could make a tidy sum. You clearly have a good eye for fashion." I nearly choked on my wine. Even now, he could only see the monetary value of art and creativity. Louise and I were vessels for him to increase his fortune and prestige. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. When Ethan dropped me home, I felt nothing but disdain roiling inside me. The time had come for me to stand up and walk away from this toxic, vacuous family. After the second disastrous dinner with Ethan's family, I found myself at a crossroads. The blatant disrespect and condescension I had experienced left me reeling. I knew I deserved better, but a small part of me still clung to the hope that our relationship could be salvaged. Ethan kept apologizing and begging me for another chance. "It will be different this time, I promise," he pleaded. "Just give them one more chance to get to know the real you." I was reluctant. The first 2 meetings had gone terribly, leaving me feeling belittled and small. But maybe I owed it to Ethan to try one last time before walking away for good. Before agreeing to anything, I met with my mentor Louise again, seeking her wisdom. She listened thoughtfully as I recounted the details of that night. Harold's dismissiveness towards my career, the passive aggression masked as superficial compliments. Louise shook her head, a hint of anger in her eyes. "This whole family sounds toxic, Marina. Sometimes you have to know when enough is enough." I knew she was right. I had compromised myself time and again to appease their egos. I deserved to be with someone who valued me for who I was. Still, there was a tiny part of me that hoped Ethan would finally stand up for me if I gave him this one last chance. I decided to agree to a final dinner, but I would do it on my own terms this time. No more diminishing myself for their comfort. When Ethan arrived to pick me up, I wore an even bolder outfit, adorned with pieces from several emerging designers. I could see the surprise in Ethan's eyes, but he said nothing as we drove to meet his parents. At dinner, Harold's eyes lingered on my clothes with unveiled disdain. Before he could make a snide remark, I spoke up. "I'm wearing some new designers, ones who are doing groundbreaking work experimenting with sustainable materials. Since you have such an interest in fashion, I thought you'd appreciate these conscious pieces." Harold's mouth snapped shut, unable to formulate a response. The rest of Ethan's family shifted uncomfortably. As dinner progressed, I continued speaking out passionately about my beliefs, challenging their superficial mindsets. With each word, I felt myself reclaiming my power. Ethan watched me with a stunned expression, like he was seeing me clearly for the first time. Finally, Harold sneered. "What's gotten into you tonight, Marina? This new attitude of yours is quite off-putting." I smiled calmly as I stood up from my seat. "With all due respect, nothing has gotten into me. This is who I have been all along. But instead of appreciating that, You have dismissed and belittled me at every turn. I see now that our values are simply incompatible. Ethan, I'm sorry, but we're over. I wish you and your family all the best." With that, I turned and walked away from that life forever, my head held high. I stepped out into the night feeling freer than I had in years. It was time for me to focus on people who would value me for who I was. This experience had given me the strength and clarity I needed to live authentically without compromising my integrity ever again. After walking out on Ethan and his family, I was filled with a new sense of purpose. The ultimate revenge would be showing them I could thrive without their approval or validation. I decided to put all my energy into an upcoming gallery showcase organized by my mentor Louise. She had curated an exhibit featuring work from young avant-garde artists like myself. It was the perfect opportunity to announce myself to the Chicago art scene. My centerpiece would be a mixed-media sculpture I had been working on for months, incorporating materials scavenged from thrift stores and garage sales. Each piece represented a fragmented memory from my relationship with Ethan. I wanted to transform that experience into impactful art. In the weeks leading up to the exhibit, I worked day and night on my sculpture. Using blue torches, power tools, and adhesives, I obsessively shaped wire, broken mirror shards, rusted metal, and tattered fabrics into an abstract human form. When the piece was finally complete, Louise came by my studio to see it. I watched nervously as she circled it, taking in every angle. Finally, she spoke. "This is your best work yet, Marina. So raw and yet beautiful. It will stun people." Her validation filled me with confidence. This was the moment I would stake my claim as an important young artist, and Ethan's family would regret ever dismissing me. On the night of the opening, I could hardly breathe as people began trickling into the gallery. The lights illuminated my sculpture provocatively, its jagged edges and distorted shape confrontational, yet captivating. I mingled nervously, awaiting people's reactions, but as I glanced around the room, I did a double take. There in the corner were none other than Ethan and his parents. Our eyes met briefly before Ethan looked away awkwardly. What were they doing here? Louise must have included them on the invite list before everything happened. I watched as they made their way slowly around the exhibit, Harold looking bored and unimpressed. Finally, they came upon my sculpture. They stared at it silently, confusion etched on their faces. Harold turned to me. "You made this thing?" he asked in a patronizing tone. I stepped towards them boldly. "Yes. This sculpture represents my personal journey over the past year, transforming pain into art." Harold snorted derisively. "Well, I can't say I understand it. A little too avant-garde for my taste." I stood tall, holding his gaze. "Maybe you're just not looking closely enough." Around us, other attendees began taking notice of the tense interaction. Voices murmured, "Isn't that Marina Caldwell, the artist?" Harold shifted uncomfortably under the attention. For once, I felt in control. This was my space, my world. I spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "If you'll excuse me, I should continue mingling. So glad you could make it to see my work." With that, I turned and rejoined the crowd, leaving them to reckon with a world they could neither understand nor control. My moment of retaliation was complete. In the weeks following the art gallery showcase, I thrilled in the glow of my newfound success. The local press had raved about my bold and confrontational sculpture. My piece was now in high demand, with offers coming in from collectors across the country. After years of struggling and doubting myself, I was finally being recognized on my own terms. And knowing that Ethan's arrogant family had borne witness to my talent blossoming made it all the sweeter. One morning, I arrived at my studio to find an ornate envelope waiting on my work table. The return address was Ethan's parents' downtown high-rise. Curiosity mixed with apprehension as I tore it open. The heavy cardstock invitation announced the opening of a new contemporary art gallery in their building. At the bottom was a handwritten note from Ethan's mother. "Dear Marina, your remarkable work at Louise's recent showcase inspired Harold and I to venture into the art world ourselves. We would be honored if you would attend the grand opening of our gallery next weekend. We truly hope to see your sculpture displayed at the space one day." Warmly, Elizabeth I nearly burst out laughing. They wanted me to be part of their vanity project? After years of scorn and dismissal towards my craft, I decided I would attend their opening, if only to see them humiliate themselves trying to fit into my world. That Saturday, I dressed in an avant-garde, daring outfit and walked into their pristine gallery space. One glance confirmed it was exactly as I expected, all style over substance. Trendy, abstract paintings adorned the walls, clearly chosen by an overpriced consultant. Ethan's parents rushed towards me eagerly. "Marina, so delighted you could come," gushed Elizabeth. Harold grinned next to her. "We'd love to give you a tour of the space," he offered. As we meandered through the rooms, they name-dropped artists and raved about each meaningless piece. I hid my smirk. Finally, we arrived at the back room. "We've saved the best for last," Elizabeth said. They stepped aside, revealing my sculpture prominently displayed. "We acquired this from Louise's gallery," Harold announced proudly. "It's the crown jewel of our collection." I froze, rage simmering through me. "You bought my piece?" I asked incredulously. "Well, we wanted to showcase the city's best emerging talent," Elizabeth trilled. My anger spilled over. "Talent which you did nothing but deride and dismiss for years," I shot back. "You don't get to buy your way into my world when it's convenient for you." I barged past their shocked faces and stormed out, refusing to let them taint my success for their vanity. My work was never for sale to the likes of them. The look on their faces was payment enough for me. In the aftermath of the disastrous art gallery opening, I refused to let Ethan's family intimidate me into submission. If anything, their brazen attempt to acquire my work had lit a fire in me. I was more determined than ever to call them out in a public, scathing act of defiance. Louise cautioned me to take the high road. "Their actions already reflect poorly on them," she said gently. "You don't need to stoop to their level." But my anger and hurt went deeper than logic. I decided to attend a prestigious charity benefit that I knew Ethan's family would be at. It was time for a very public reckoning. I wore a simple black sheath dress and an icy expression as I entered the ballroom, immediately spotting Ethan and his parents holding court. As we locked eyes, I noted nervousness in Harold's face, but I didn't plan to confront them directly. That would be too kind. During the program, a wealthy benefactor took the stage to announce a major donation. I recognized him from the newspaper, a real estate mogul who had ruthlessly bought up low-income housing and displaced families, all in the name of progress. When polite applause sounded, I stood up and booed loudly. Shocked faces turned to me. Before anyone could react, I strode onto the stage and grabbed the microphone. "This man deserves condemnation, not celebration," I declared passionately to the stunned crowd. "He is responsible for rampant gentrification and suffering of the vulnerable. His donation is blood money." Murmurs arose as security rushed towards me, but I continued staring defiantly until they hauled me away. The story would make headlines tomorrow, I knew. Ethan appeared at my side as I was escorted out. "Marina, what were you thinking?" he hissed. I met his eyes unwaveringly. "The better question is, what are you thinking? Aligning yourself with these toxic elites, letting them stomp on others." My voice rose with anger. "You've thrown away every good thing between us to worship at the altar of greed and status." I stepped closer and spat out my final blow. "You and your whole damned family deserve each other." I shoved past Ethan, leaving him speechless amidst the swirling chaos. My heels clicked across the marble lobby as I strode outside with my head held high, finally free of their grasp. The next weeks passed in a blur. My defiant act had gone viral, with many lauding me as a champion for justice. Galleries and universities invited me to speak. My calendar filled with events and interviews. One morning, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. I opened it to find Ethan holding a single red rose. Before he could speak, I stepped forward and shut the door firmly in his face. I had nothing left to say to him or his family. My sights were set on a new horizon now. Let Ethan's privileged world crumble under the weight of its own rotten foundation. I would continue shining light on those they had trampled. With my new platform, I was only getting started. In the weeks after I publicly denounced Ethan's family, fallout from the scandal spread steadily through Chicago's elite circles. Whispers followed Ethan's parents everywhere, with friends and colleagues carefully avoiding them at social events. Their real estate empire took a hit as partners withdrew investments, not wanting the negative publicity. Harold responded by trying to smooth things over, penning op-eds and making appearances at charity events, but his desperate attempts to salvage his family's reputation only made things worse. Meanwhile, my career catapulted to new heights. The fame from my defiant, viral act earned me features in major publications. Galleries clamored to host my work. Invitations poured in for speaking engagements across the country. It was a gratifying vindication after years of patronization from Ethan's family. They had sneered at my unsophisticated art, oblivious to the raw talent right under their noses. How quickly the tides had changed. At my recent openings, I scanned the room, almost hoping to witness Harold and Elizabeth attending like scorned groupies. But of course, they were too humiliated to show their faces now. One evening, I arrived home to find an envelope wedged in my door. My guard immediately went up, thinking it was another pathetic plea from Ethan. But the return address was from Louise's gallery. Inside was a printed email between her and a writer for ArtNet News. "Hello, Louise. I'm working on a piece about Chicago's rising art stars and would love to feature Marina Caldwell. Her scathing manifesto against elitism took real courage. Do you have quotes you could contribute about her talent and integrity? Many thanks, Sam." I hugged the note to my chest, Louise's words warming me. Marina has always had a vision and voice far beyond her years. She turns injustice into art that makes you think and feel. Stay tuned, because this is only the beginning for her. After the darkness of recent months, it was profoundly moving to read Louise's unwavering support laid out. No matter what vitriol or opposition I faced, she believed in my gifts. I penned a heartfelt letter to Louise, thanking her for standing by me. I hoped one day I could be that kind of mentor to an emerging creative spirit. That was the only power and legacy I aspired to now. Let Ethan and his family cling to their dwindling status and wealth, constantly looking over their shoulders. I didn't need them or their world. I had everything I needed, my voice, my vision, and people who genuinely nurtured my talents rather than exploiting them. And that was worth more than they could ever grasp. In the weeks following the explosive will reading, I threw myself into learning the brewery business. As Dad's handpicked successor, I needed to understand every aspect of the company now under my stewardship. I toured the grounds, talking with employees and learning their roles hands-on. The seasoned workers taught me the intricate brewing process, from selecting premium ingredients right down to bottling and distribution. As I reviewed accounting records, the picture came into clear focus. Dad built this empire from the ground up, showing me the deeper meaning behind his years of endless work. The company meant far more than profit margins to him. It meant community, jobs for hundreds, partnerships with local farms, families sustained for generations. The brewery wove lives together in a way I never fully appreciated until now. Late one evening, as I finalized a new hire's papers, loud shouts rang out from the parking lot. I rushed outside to investigate. My gut tightened at what I saw. Evelyn and Declan stood screaming at Tom, Dad's loyal head brewer of 20 years. In the shadows lurked several suited men with hard expressions. Evelyn's usually polished blonde hair hung in frazzled strands as she jabbed a finger at Tom. "You have no right to block us," she shrilled. "Marshall promised us control." Tom stood firm, arms crossed. "This is Mr. Ryder's brewery now, as Mr. Marshall wanted. I aim to uphold his wishes." Declan grabbed Tom's shirt, wrenching the older man close. "Tell us the access codes to the system mainframe now," he growled, "or my associates will convince you the hard way." The suited men cracked their knuckles, malice glinting in their eyes. Tom paled but lifted his chin. "I won't betray Mr. Marshall's son. Do your worst." Rage exploded within me. I stalked forward, muscles coiled tight. "Let him go!" My shout echoed sharply. Everyone froze. Evelyn recovered first, her smile dripping false sweetness. "Ryder, darling, we were just having a chat with Tom here." I cut through her facade with a blistering glare. "Get off my property, now." Declan released Tom hastily as they scrambled to their car. Pausing, Evelyn hissed at me, "You'll pay for this," before peeling out down the road. I watched them go, chest heaving. So now they resorted to threats and violence, revealing desperation to reclaim what they considered their lost inheritance. Well, that was never happening. I turned to Tom, who gave me a grateful nod. In that small gesture, I recognized the deeper bond of trust Dad and Tom shared now flowing to me. As we walked back inside, steely purpose took root within me. Evelyn and Declan wanted war? Fine. For the brewery, for Dad and for Tom, I would give them absolute hell. No more playing nice. That time ended when they laid hands on my people and tried dismantling Dad's legacy. If those snakes wanted to fight, I would rain fire on their ambitions until only ashes remained. My father's company now lived through me, and I protected what was mine. Years had passed since I walked away from Ethan and his toxic family. In that time, my career and self-confidence flourished beyond what I could have imagined. After publicly calling them out, doors opened for me to elevate other unheard voices through my art. Galleries and universities gave me platforms to share searing work exposing social injustice. My days filled with passion and purpose as I collaborated with inspiring minds. The fame and fortune were secondary. I treasured the connections most of all. Of course, the curiosity lingered about whatever became of Ethan and his parents after their spectacular downfall. I caught occasional rumors of them selling off assets and withdrawing from the public eye. But I felt no desire to follow up or relish their suffering. I had made my point and moved on. Their world held no appeal for me anymore, nor any power over my life path. One morning, an envelope arrived containing a wedding invitation from my friend Sophie, another artist and outspoken spirit. I smiled, remembering late nights working together in my cramped studio, dreaming of the day our voices would be heard. That evening, I eagerly attended her show, first displaying the two of us as young hopefuls. Seeing our unjaded faces juxtaposed with who we had become was profoundly moving. Pride welled up in me for Sophie and for my own growth. As I gazed at the photos, one figure standing sullenly in the corner caught my eye. Ethan. A part of our history together I had forgotten. Sophie noticed my stare and came over. "Ancient history," she said, squeezing my shoulder. I nodded, letting the past dissolve once more. At Sophie's wedding the next weekend, I toasted her and her husband, celebrating the power of love between partners who see each other fully. No pretense or jockeying for control, just joyful union. My own romantic life had seen ups and downs over the years. I endured some hard lessons on the path to knowing my worth, but I approached relationships now with wisdom to recognize truth and reciprocity. During the reception, Sophie's father Ron, a retired steelworker, approached me. "I'm so thankful Sophie had you as a friend starting out," he said gruffly. "You always valued her for who she really is." I squeezed his calloused hand, overcome with emotion. This was the only legacy I cared about, lifting up others so their light could shine. As a new day dawned, I awoke filled with gratitude for the hard-won lessons that shaped me. I had broken free from toxic expectations and found my voice. What lay ahead I didn't know, but I would meet it boldly, without compromise.